So we have Greg with Pilot Institute, who many of us know is pretty much the go-to for getting your 107 pilot license for drone pilots. And we're going to talk a little bit about remote ID and what exactly that is, because I have actually confusion to what that is. So maybe we can start with that, Greg, and maybe you can actually say your last name so we can all actually pronounce it, since I don't know.
Well, Greg from Pilot Institute is usually pretty good, but yeah,
Okay.
Greg Reverdio here. So, do you have any specific questions about remote ID, or is there like a specific topic? I mean, I can talk about what it is in general.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, what does it really mean to us as 107 pilots, and also as people who are just flying recreationally? Like, how is it going to affect us in our everyday lives as drone pilots or drone enthusiasts, just going out and flying, whether it's on a job or just going out and getting some footage because we want to as a hobbyist?
Yep. So remote ID, in a few words, is a message that's going to be sent by your drone to other people in the area. This is a localized technology because it's based on Wi-Fi or based on Bluetooth, which means that it's not going to go very far. But the idea is your location, the location of the drone, the location of the pilot, the altitude of the drone, the altitude of the pilot are going to be essentially sent to well, devices that are in the area. When I say device, it's going to be a device like a cell phone that can receive that signal and then put it on the map. And that's essentially what it means. Now, you mentioned Part 107 versus recreational pilots. Any drone that needs to be registered is going to need to have remote ID starting in September of 2023, which is next year, a little bit less than a year from now. Drones that don't need to be registered, so drones that are flown for recreational purposes that are under 250 grams, don't need to have remote ID, but drones that are flown for Part 107 of any weight are going to have remote ID.
Okay, so Nano Pluses and Mini 2s and Mini 3s, as long as we're not flying for business purposes, we don't need remote ID?
That's correct.
That's kind of cool in a way. So who's going to actually be utilizing the remote ID? Who's going to be on the other end? Like who?
So it's designed for pretty much anyone to find out if there is a drone that's flying around and to be able to identify it, even though the only thing you can identify is the location of the pilot and then a serial number. People say a license plate, so it's kind of like a license plate. You don't see the name of the pilot. You don't see their phone number. You don't see any personal data. It's called PII, personally identifiable information. And the idea is that the FAA and law enforcement want to know where the drone pilot is located in case that drone is flying in an area where it's not supposed to. That's kind of the backstory, if you want, of remote ID and the reason that we were given for having remote ID on our drones.
Do you feel all the people flying over the stadiums and all of that kind of not so good behavior has been affecting
that's
this?
A perfect example.
Yeah,
that's a perfect example if you think about it. Knowing who that person is and where they're located would help in this case to identify and go talk to them. Whether they're doing it, on purpose or they're doing it by mistake is not the point here. It's just to be able to go talk to the pilot. The way I look at it is forest fires, for example. We have a lot of forest fires where I live, and we want to be able to go and talk to the pilot that's flying the drone when the firefighting aircraft are coming around the corner. They will stop operation, which means that somebody's house can burn because they've stopped firefighting because there was a drone in the area. So I think that's a perfect application for remote ID. Obviously, there's a lot of other downsides, including that information being available to the general public, which is something that we've been very vocal. I've been very vocal about it from day one when the FAA proposed that. I don't want my location or the location of a 13-year-old kid that's flying a drone be available to the public. I don't think that's something that the general public needs to have access to.
Do you feel people are going to take it upon themselves to maybe try to snip stuff in the bud if they know someone's flying illegally and just take it upon themselves as opposed to letting the FAA handle it with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's already been people that are angry that come at pilots with guns and that shoot at drones. I don't think that's going to make it any better. That's going to make it a lot worse, actually.
So will there be an app for this? So I mean, I can go ahead and most likely download an app that's gonna give me the access to check out where anyone's flying with remote ID.
Yep, and there's already an app out there. There's several of them, but if you download the app right now, it's a little bit confusing because there's not many drones that broadcast the signal. Even the ones that are advertised as broadcasting the signal don't seem to be broadcasting the signal. I think we'll see more of that being turned on by firmware update in the future. We've done some testing internally. We have yet to be able to display any drones on any phone. It looks like if you have an iPhone, so an iOS device, Apple does not allow app developers, to use the feature that would scan for drones, which is Wi-Fi, in your area. So if you have a drone that broadcasts remote ID using Wi-Fi, you probably won't be able to detect it using an iPhone. And I don't know that it's going to change in the future. We're not sure because this is
Hmm.
an Apple restriction, not a not anything else, not an FAA restriction. So, but it looks like Android phones have the ability to pick up that Wi-Fi signal and identify the drone. So we have both devices in the office, and we have yet to be able to find either of these and get a signal yet.
Interesting. So anyone with an iOS iPhone is pretty much not going to be able to do that, huh?
It looks like it so far until I think Apple changes their APK or their SDK for allowing app developers to use that specific feature that would allow to do that.
Interesting. That's pretty wild, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of my subscribers ask, I figure it's kind of pertinent to this, what is the FAA plan in order to make some enforcement examples of non-compliant recreational flyers, in particular park ripping or backyard flying in G airspace? So I don't know if that's kind of along the lines of the remote ID.
I don't think the FAA is interested in people that, let's put it this way, flying slightly over 400 feet is to me the equivalent of driving 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I like to use that as a reference for, is the FAA going to go after the person that's flying 5 miles over the speed limit? No, they're not. If you're flying in Class Bravo airspace where there is a busy airspace and you're flying at 2,000 or 3,000 feet, yeah, that's probably where the FAA is going to come down and drop the hammer, as they should, quite frankly. This to me is a dangerous operation. But as far as you flying slightly beyond visual line of sight or flying slightly over 400 feet, probably not something that the FAA is going to be worried about, and as they should, quite frankly. So I don't think I would be worried about remote ID being used by the FAA to catch you doing
Minor
minor
little things.
infractions. Yeah. As opposed to, if you decide that you want to fly 3,000 feet above the ground, yeah, that's probably something that they're going to be able to catch. And but even then, think about the limitations of technology. Wi-Fi is not going to go that far off the ground, so it's going to be a limited technology, I think, as we start to implement it.
So if someone wants to go ahead and launch their drone and fly without a remote ID compliant drone, what's going to happen?
I don't know. That's really the bottom line. I don't know that the FAA has the room to enforce, but it's always the same thing. You could be. It's the same thing as when you drive your car on the road. You could be driving 100 miles an hour on a highway, and you can say what's going to happen. Probably nothing for the majority until you meet a cop that's waiting on the side of the road, and then you're going to get a ticket. As far as breaking the rules when the FAA is not looking, nothing is going to happen. If you get into an accident and then the FAA does a little investigation and finds out that they have your records and they find out that you were flying 3 miles away from your station and you were flying at 3,000 feet above the ground, they'll find all that information and they'll drop the hammer. But it's always the same thing. What do you do when the FAA is not watching? Is the same thing as what do you do when the cops are not watching? When you drive your car. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, so just be as compliant as you can, and kind of the same adage, it's not a big deal until it is a big deal.
until something happens. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and then your insurance is going to drop. Yeah, let's say that you create damage on somebody's car, uh, or if you fly over someone, you can fly over someone 100 times. We know it's not legal to do so right now without the proper equipment. And then up until the day where you lose a battery when you're flying over someone and you injure someone, you injure somebody's kid, you kill somebody's pet, and then you're going to end up in court, and then your insurance company is going to say, "I'm sorry, you were breaking the rules. We're not going to cover this kind of stuff." So uh, again, I think flying a drone is very much the same as driving a car. The same repercussions can happen, and you can break the rules every day until something happens.
As far as the modules, I mean, are drones going to be just shipped then with remote ID compliant C built into them, like a Mavic 3?
Yep.
Will a Mavic 3 just be remote ID compliant, like the one I have sitting behind me? Does that have the ability to be remote ID compliant right now, or will they start shipping with?
So it depends on the drone, but starting in September of next year, September 2023, actually, I'm sorry, no,
It's
starting in
September
December of
23rd,
this
right?
year. Well, yeah, but 21st. But in this case,
Oh,
it's December of this year. The FAA has pushed back the deadline. It was supposed to be September of this year. They pushed it back to December of this year. So December of 2022, drones that are manufactured will have to be compliant with remote ID. So you as a buyer, really starting after December, technically every drone that you buy will new, not used, but every drone that you buy new will be compliant with remote ID if it's over 250 grams. Because under that, as we said, it's not always required. So Mavic 3 is already compliant. It's already been approved by the FAA. There's a website that shows the declaration of compliance, it's called, and it basically shows that that drone is good to go. So there's a pretty long list now. There's quite a few of them. Autel has added the Lite series, so the Lite Plus and the Lite are both approved. The Evo 2 version 3 is approved, if I remember correctly, to the list, and then a bunch of DJI drones have been approved, including the Classic that just came out, the regular Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Cine. All the Mavic 3 Enterprise have been added. The Air 2S is on there. The Matrice 30 is on there as well. So there's quite a few now that are approved, and I'm sure that list is going to keep growing as we go.
all right. Well, that can kind of segue into possibly talking about the Mavic 3 Classic and the Mavic 3. Not that it's that exciting, but what do you think about that release? Do you think it's kind of a yawn, or do you think it's actually a good drone to be out there in the lineup?
Oh, I think it's a great idea from DJI, quite frankly. I think they realized that by launching that drone. So think about it this way: the DJI had the Mavic 2 series, which was very popular, right? Mavic 2 Pro, Mavic 2 Zoom, and these drones had two different purposes. The one was a zoom with a slightly smaller sensor, and then you had the ability to zoom. And one was the 1-inch sensor, which was, I think, a workhorse. I think a lot of people still use that. We do, quite frankly. We still have it in the office, and I don't think it's outdated by any means. But then they came up with the Mavic 3 that was the combination of the Mavic 2 Zoom and the Mavic 2 Pro. It has a zoom lens and it has a wide angle lens all in one payload. And and then they realized that people weren't that interested in spending that much money into the drone. I think I still think they sold a bazillion of them, but I think they realized, hey, what if we made a slightly cheaper version of this drone that is essentially the replacement for the Mavic 2 Pro? It's the drone without the zoom lens. It's cheap. I mean, it's cheap. It's affordable. I don't think it's cheap. It's affordable, and it's a great replacement for whoever doesn't want to have that zoom lens, which I think is the majority of the people. Everybody I talk to doesn't really care for the zoom lens. I disagree. I think I like the zoom lens. I think it gives me a different perspective, but I think they hit it on the head as far as giving options to people. Now you have the same exact platform, the same exact chassis if you want, and they've built 5 drones out of it, right? The 3 Classic, the three Cine, the 3 Enterprise, and then the 3 Thermal. They have 5 different platforms now, just like what they did with the Mavic, with the Phantom. We're back to the Phantom 4 platform that's going to be carrying a whole lot of different payloads and be used in a lot of different verticals. So I think it's
Where,
brilliant on their part.
where's the Phantom 5?
Not going to happen. I can tell you right now,
Yeah, that's
based
never
on
happening.
this Mavic 3. No, that's the Mavic. The Phantom 5 is the Mavic 3. That's clear to me, and I don't have any insider information from DJI, but it's clear to me that we'll never see a Phantom 5.
Yeah, I think the 7 times zoom on the Mavic 3 is actually amazing. It gives a lot of
Mhm.
versatility to that drone, especially if you have the RC and then you have a Mini 3 Pro. The ability to shoot vertically and have a 7 times zoom and have a good low light. I mean, it really is a good little backup drone, and it's a cool little
Yep.
setup.
Oh, it's great. I think it's a great platform. So yeah, it was kind of a snooze fest in a way because they came up with the same exact drone, except they removed the zoom lens. But if you think about from the on the back end from a marketing perspective, I think it's quite brilliant actually.
So how about Autel with the Evo 2 Pro 6K version 3? Apparently, it's the same
Huh.
exact camera. John
Yes.
McBride said it had a little quicker processor, but it
Hmm.
says that it's improved upon, like all the critical functions. That's what Autel said officially, have been improved upon.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what
I
that
think it goes
means.
further. I think the reception is better on the drone. I haven't had my chance to. Well, I've seen it. I've flown it at a conference, but I haven't been able to just put it to the test in the studio. But the distance is better. Here's what's happening. I think with Autel, and it's completely out of their hands, is the fact that the chip shortage is hurting them pretty badly. It hurt them going from V1 to V2, and the I think the Evo 2 is a great platform. It's to me the equivalent of the Mavic 2 platform at the time. They did a great competitor, and it works. It has a good sensor. It has good flight time. This drone flew 45 minutes before any DJI drone flew for 45 minutes. And you have one. I know you've used them a lot, and I know you like them. So, um, but then the chip shortage came around the corner, so they came up with a V2, and then Remote ID came around the corner, and I think they realized that the V2 chip was not good for a Remote ID. They weren't going to be able to do Remote ID with that chip. So now they had to change chips one more time to get to version 3. That's I don't have any insider information about that, but the timing is pretty obvious to me that this is the problem that they faced. So now they have controllers that don't work with chip 1 and chip 2 but work with chip 3, so all the controllers can only work with that specific chip that they were designed for. So it dilutes the market, it makes it harder for people to sell their drone used, and but I don't think there was a way around it for them if they wanted to be remote ID compliant. So it's a bummer, quite frankly, because I think it's a great line, it's a great platform, and Autel has a way to potential to be competitor to DJI.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, you see it with the different chipsets being forced upon them, and then you see the customer service kind of lacking, and then just having a hard time with everything. I mean, again, when I had the Evo 2 Pro 6K version 1 and I bought the version 1 smart controller, and then right away the version 2 came out, and then the version 1, it's just messy. Became
Yep,
really
it's messy.
sloppy and unfortunate, and everyone was kind of bummed out, and it just seems like it's getting a little bit progressively worse. Yeah, I mean, I really
I
want
agree.
to see Autel succeed, but it just seems like they have a lot of kind of things going against them, unfortunately.
Yep, and I think that they're faced with a shortage of finding qualified people to do support, and I think that's every business in the country, quite frankly, and even more so with drones because now you're faced with finding people that want to do customer service, which is hard, I think, and then that need to be knowledgeable about drones. So then you can sell. They released two new drones, the Nano and the Light, and all of a sudden they become more popular, but they have to find more people to do support, and they can't find people to do support. So it's it's a very unfortunate situation, quite frankly. But I know they're working hard at it. I talk to John on a pretty regular basis. He's a great guy. I see him at conferences all the time, and we talk about these things. And he knows, he's fully aware of it. I know everybody at Autel is aware of it, and they want to do a good job. It's just hard.
Yeah, I talked with Tom, who is, I think, handling the customer support, and he stood by me with my Enterprise 6K when I was having issues with using the standard remote, and they actually ended up refunding me and giving me my money back. But that was
Oh, wow.
big on them for helping out and standing by the drone when we were having constant problems with the reception and transmission. So that was cool. I mean, they are trying
Yep.
to do right, and they're just limited with their
Hmm.
staffing. So,
Yep.
is there anything you'd like to add? Remote ID was really, I think,
Hmm.
the important topic to kind of bring a little bit more light to for me and maybe
Yeah,
others who are still in the dark, not really understanding, because it is kind of confusing.
it is.
Because even on my Mavic 3, when I was flying the other day, I got a remote ID error. Like, what was that about? Do you have any idea?
That's because you updated, I guess. Yeah, you updated to the new software. I think it's going to be confusing for a while until a few years down the line where older drones are going to disappear and we're going to remember these drones as the ones that are not remote ID compliant that are going to need to have a module on top of them to be remote ID compliant. I think going forward, all the new people that are going to start in this industry, which is going to be a lot of people, are never going to know a time before remote ID. It's like I remember before we had Lance, and it's almost like I forgot about that time because it was a pain in the butt. It was hard to fly to get approval without having Lance. And then now Lance is a no-brainer. It's a 2-second process where you get your approval and then you're done. I think we're going to look at remote ID kind of like this in the future. Although I think there's still some speed bumps coming ahead because of the unknown and because of the fact that that location is going to be shared with other people in the area. I don't agree with that.
So, what's your go-to for getting Lance authorization? Because I know you weren't really a big fan of AirMap, and then Aloft kind of it all kind of shifted a little bit. So, who would you use to get Lance authorization now? Like before you fly, or
Definitely Aloft. I think Aloft is far ahead of anyone in the industry. They just came up with a new app, and for the life of me, I can Air Control. I can never remember the name of it.
yeah.
And they shifted with that. I mean, Aloft does I think over 70% of all lens authorizations in the country. So they're a sure value. I know both of the owners or the creators of the app. They're great guys. I've talked to them at conferences at length. I've interviewed John, who's the CEO, and I think they're on the same page as many in the industry. So I want to support them. Like you said, AirMap was never really, I think, in line with what the industry wanted, which is the reason why they've kind of disappeared. And then they were purchased, and then now it's kind of a different entity completely. I don't think AirMap is ever going to be a big player in the lens space anymore, just because Drawn Up purchased AirMap, and then I think they're going to want to use them more internally than anything else. And so I think Aloft is the clear winner in this case.
How about before you fly? Would you utilize
So
them at
before
all?
you, so before you fly is not really a lens authorization. It's
It's more for
more
just
of a
airspace.
It's an airspace information app. I think Before You Fly is a great app for beginners. If you're just getting into it, it's created by Loft actually for the FAA, so it's an FAA app technically, but it's put together by Aloft. So both apps can talk to each other. Once you get into Before You Fly, if you want to get airspace approval, you click on there, and then it's going to take you to Aloft. So yeah, I think it's an unnecessary step for me personally, just because I can get all my information directly in Aloft and then get approval right away. But I think for people that are starting, it's a great way to visualize the airspace.
All right. Well, hopefully everything recorded. This is a test run in a way for me with Greg. So I'm glad he took the time and energy to join me. Much appreciated. I know John is in Hawaii right now, so I'm a little bit jealous, but that's good. He's getting some relaxing family time, I think. But regardless,
Yep.
yeah. Anything else? I mean, if anyone isn't familiar, Pilot Institute definitely is the go-to if you're needing to get your 107 pilot's license. How many people have taken your course? Just a
On
few.
the Part 107, 55,000 right now, more than pretty much anybody else in the business. And then we've got over 200,000 students in the system now. So yeah,
Nice.
we've grown to become the number one online training organization for drones, I think by far right now.
So for now, that's it. Stay tuned. Maybe we'll get the ability to get Greg on one more time. Hopefully, it'll be smooth sailing. And again, this was a little bit of a test run, so I'm hoping it all turned out audio, video wise. But for now, thank you, Greg, for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
All right, cool. Thank you.